You're listening to the world's smartest podcast network.
Welcome back to another episode of Majoring in Everything. I am your host, Andrea Jones-Rooy, and we are yet again meeting someone who does lots of different things and has lots of experiences in lots of different fields. And we're going to talk about how you get from one seemingly unrelated field to another and surprising connections, or maybe unsurprising lack of connections between them. We're very excited to welcome to this show comedian, political commentarist. Is that the word I want?
Sure.
Political writer for CNN, MSNBC, and the host of the Dean Obeidallah show every night, 5 nights a week on SiriusXM Radio. Put your hands together and give a very warm Majoring in Everything welcome to Dean Obeidallah.
Yay!
Yay! I always end up making the guests clap for themselves because it's just the two of us here. How you doing? Thanks for joining the show.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for being on my show so often. So I appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's the least I could do is say, Dean, come talk to me and I'm going to drive the conversation for an hour. So you're in the hot seat and the time has come. We need other comedians and a producer, but otherwise it's all the same. So thanks for coming to the show. I know you as a comedian and radio host and true political analyst, not like, oh, I'm a comedian who does political commentary. Like, you write serious, not that funny articles for MSNBC, CNN, and frankly, your Twitter and Instagram updates are pretty much the main thing that motivate me to get involved in the mess that is American politics and to like fight for progress and all that good stuff. So talk to me and share with listeners. I'm sure they've heard you on your show, but what is it that you do? How do you spend your time these days, would you say?
Well, it depends. Do you mean work related, how I do it? Because I overwork. I mean, okay. I have the same work ethic. My dad is a Palestinian immigrant, so I have the immigrant work ethic of my dad. And I work many, many more hours prepping for my show than anyone should have to. But the reality is, if I didn't have my show, I probably would read almost as much on my own about the news and politics. I mean, literally before we came on, I was just reading James Comey's statement from July 2016, where he said he was not going to indict Hillary Clinton. And I wanted to read that. It was a long analysis to prepare for my show, but also prepare for the whataboutism from the right about, but Hillary Clinton. So much of my days, I wake up, I look at the news, I look at Twitter, and I start writing down notes about issues of the day for my radio show. And then there are times I do comedy, still do comedy a few times a week. I was a full-time comic for about 12 years, that's how I made my living, traveling the nation, the world. I did a lot of shows in the Middle East. But now it's primarily in the media. It's either preparing for my show. I write generally once a week for CNN on Sundays and once a week for MSNBC. And a couple times a month, I interview people for Salon.com. I'll write an article for Salon as well. So it's busy, but I'm lucky on some level. I get to do what I want, except ultimately what I want is to do nothing.
Well, you're failing miserably, I have to say.
Right,
I don't normally say that on my show, but you're,
right.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's it. My days, I work a lot of hours. I almost work as many hours as I was a lawyer now, but at least I delude myself into believing I might be having an impact on issues and making a difference. That's my hope.
Well, I will say that if you do ever figure out how to do nothing, come on my next show, which will be Majoring in Nothing, where we all talk about how we sit around all day and just, live off the government like everyone thinks that the people on the left do anyway. So let me talk about the work that you do going into your show. So if folks haven't listened to it already, it's awesome. SiriusXM Progress, right? Is that
channel 127, 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, 5 nights a week.
And I know it because you have me on every now and again, and it's super fun to talk about what just happened, which is, you'll bring on a panel of comedians and we'll all talk about the political events of the week. But the rest of the time, it's a very serious show. I love it, for example, when you have Mary Trump on and dissect everything that's wrong with her family member. But it's serious, high level political figures. So how did you go from comedy to literally weighing in on the politics of the nation at an extremely high level for national outlets?
Well, you said in the intro, is there some kind of like connective tissue between all of this? And there is, because when I was a young boy in New Jersey, where I was born, I was active in the Young Democrats. I was president of the Bergen County Young Democrats. And I went to law school because it seemed the right pedigree to run for office. So my whole goal when I was younger was to run for office and be a congressman or a senator, or maybe the first Arab American president, something like that.
I'd vote for the first Arab American president.
That's it. I'm also half Italian, so you have both things going on there. But that would
finally unite the country. That might do it, actually. I'm not
bring all the Arabs and Italians together. That'll be about 4 million people. So that's really remarkable. So in any event, like it was just doing, my interest in politics was always there, but so was my interest in comedy. And it's sort of, you become reflective on your own life and you say, what do you really want? So I went to law school. I was a lawyer at a big firm in New Jersey. And then I went to a mid-sized firm, and I liked it a little better than the bigger firm, but I was doing politics as much as I could at night. I'm like, there's something wrong here. There's something that doesn't fit. Like, I'm really happy I got a law degree. I love education. I think it's great. Give whatever student loans you want, you can bear, go take those and get those degrees. And maybe some other president 20 years from now will cancel a little bit more of that. But so for me, it was the commonality was I loved politics and I loved comedy. Growing up, I did listen to comedy albums all the time and was in like school little productions of things, of being funny. And it's sort of like the merging happened organically. And I think I'm honestly, the biggest thing I tell people is like, deep down, you know what you want to do with your life. Everyone really knows what you want to do. The question is, what are the voices in your head telling you don't do that? And they could be sane voices like, okay, I'm 30. I'm not saying me, but someone's like, I'm 39. I want to be center fielder for the Yankees. Long shot. You could try it, but unlikely.
How did you know my true dream? That's I'm going to break gender barriers, just everything.
Right. So you'll do that. But for everyone else, like, I really think people know what they want to do and what they want to be. And often they let things stand in the way. Why not take a chance? You can always go back. It's not a prison sentence. Like, it's not if you tried for a year, it didn't work out. Okay. It's a year. So for me, I've always been really honest and reflective and saying, am I doing what I'm doing now? Is this the right fit at this point in my life? And so that's really what it was. Just started out. I was in politics before I was involved in comedy. Then I got involved as a lawyer. Then again, the merging of my interests. I became a page at NBC, where you work at NBC I make $10 an hour for making a really good salary as a lawyer. Remember the person interviewing me, like, you want to work here? This is your salary? I was clearly making more than them. You know, the supervisor. like
I hope you saved some of that, because this is not good.
So to me, that like whole path, we can go through it, but the common thread through all was I've always liked politics. I've always liked comedy. And I like merging the two, where if you can use humor to raise issues. And my comedy was so much about being Arab American and Muslim in a post 9/11 world. That was really what motivated me to really get, when I was doing comedy, to really work on it hard, because I knew I could have a chance to talk about a story that really had not been at that time told at all in America.
And you've done a number of shows. I'm going to mess up the name of it now, but a series of shows. What was it? Comedy for World Peace, or
Stand Up for Peace with Scott Blakeman.
There it is.
He's the Jewish guy. I'm the Arab Muslim guy, and we go to colleges and we fight. It was great. No, we just do comedy and bring people together. You know, I think comedy can be used I think the arts can be used more broadly as a vehicle to address issues that people might not come to. If I'm going to give a lecture today on the Middle East conflict or about fostering understanding, like, you're going to have people all self-selected, but it's like comedy show and there's a message in it. Boom. They don't even know it. They're getting candy and they're getting better at the same time. It's like a vitamin stuck in their candy.
Right. Yeah. It's spinach rolled up in the Jolly Rancher, which sounds horrible. So what is it? But do you advertise, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do, comedy from this perspective, or you're going to learn about politics? You don't say that, right? You just say, hey, it's a comedy show, right? You kind of trick people.
All the time. It's a trick. It's kind of like a subtle trick thing.
It's a magic trick no one asked for.
There's a lot of hypnosis involved in our comedy.
Right.
Wanting to know what they're doing. Like, you're getting sleepy. And it's comedy.
Yeah.
It depends on the shows. When we're doing Stand Up for Peace for years at colleges, we even did some shows at mosques with the Muslim community, or at synagogues where both the Jewish and Muslim community came out. It was advertised as a comedy show addressing being Arab and a Jewish and Muslim and Jewish in America today, and celebrating what we have in common. And we wouldn't do a tutorial on the Middle East, but at the end we would do Q&A, and people would ask questions sometimes, and you try to answer them as honestly as you can. So that's self-selecting. When I was just doing touring, it's like, I'm a comedian. Now, people Google you before today's day and age. Like, when I was young, I would drive in from New Jersey when I was in college and stuff on dates. I loved comedy. I would go to the comic strip. You'd call up and say, who are the comics? You never heard of any of them. You couldn't look them up either.
Yeah.
Today,
beautiful time.
right, today you can Google anyone. So you're not going to go, if me or you or someone's performing, you'll Google them and go, okay, I know what they're about. I like that. I don't like that. And I'm going to go to that person. So I think people are self-selecting more now than ever in terms of surprising them about what you're going to talk about, which is good and bad. I mean, the good is you're getting people who support your point of view.
Right.
The bad is you're not reaching beyond those on your side.
I was going to say, do you feel that because everything I read that you've posted is very much on the left. I agree with all of it. And I'm always thinking like, thank goodness someone's saying this.
That's why you're a genius.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of selection bias, here I am saying, yes, I think you're right. That's why I want you on my show. But what do you worry about your ability to get booked in, say, somewhere very red, and it's some club where someone looks up, your articles and says like, nah, we're not going to like your comedy, even if your comedy isn't about that sort of stuff?
I'm no longer a full-time comic, but when I was already writing for CNN, because I've been writing for CNN weekly for 10 years on Sundays. And I was going on cable news. I was going on CNN then a lot when I was first started writing for them. And I'm sure there were some people didn't like it. That's life, but I didn't do like the improvs across the country. I was fortunate enough to do colleges and then Arab organizations or Muslim organizations. They're not the same things. One's an ethnicity, one's a faith. And doing a lot of that, or doing shows with Stand Up for Peace, or I was in a tour called Axis of Evil. I mean, I've been in so many iterations of the Middle Eastern. We had a special a long time ago, 2007 on Comedy Central. It was the first time in American TV there were Middle Eastern American comedians. And it was me and 3 other comics on Comedy Central. And that kind of exploded for us. And we toured the country all over into theaters. Then we did a lot of shows in the Middle East after that. I produced a comedy festival in Jordan for 3 years because I got known in the Middle East. So my life has gone different ways. At one point, arguably myself and the other 3 comics were the best known Middle Eastern American comedians in the country. So we would tour everywhere. Mm-hmm. Now there's a lot more, and I'm not full-time comedy game right now. I may go, if I lose my radio show, I probably have that's my skill set. Probably do that or get a full-time writing job. I love writing. I really do write like opinion stuff, not a journalist. So yeah, I'm sure there were also some Arab and Muslim organizations that probably didn't book me because I was really, really liberal, not on issues dealing with them, but it's more the fear of offending anyone in the audience. They're like, well, he's known for being a real liberal. If he says stuff, someone in the audience might not like it, and we want them to stay because he leaves and then they might leave forever and we need their money and their support. Right. Could have played a role. I didn't find that to be the case. I found my community really supportive, which was great. And it continues to be good. But of course, if you take a position on a political issue, there's always a downside of losing certain people, certain bookings, certain financial gains. That's just life.
Right. And one of the things I was going to ask you is when I read your Twitter or Instagram, I think, yes. And then because I'm a coward, I don't look at any of the comments. You must deal with a nightmare of internet trolls.
I'm not here for them. I'm not here for the comments. I'm not. Okay. If they want to reach me, they have to email me.
Right.
I will gleefully read it and mock them. Right. But no, the Twitter things, unless somebody emails me or flags me, I'm not writing my tweets to convince the other side I'm right. I'm writing my tweets, one, is because I'm generally organically upset or want to share something. And second, to get our base to be as knowledgeable as possible and to counter the lies from the other side. I'm not here for them. There's an old time mentality of trying to build consensus on issues. That's gone. We live in a time where you just have to overperform your base and you can win elections. And so for us, for Democrats, if we have us and independents who lean left, or at least centrists and lean left on enough issues, we can win elections. I'm not going to convince the MAGA people that, oh, wow, they just read a tweet and they're like, you know what? He's right. I
think Trump has been misleading us this whole time. Yeah.
So it's never that. It's never, there's never a time where, I used to have people go like, well, why don't you talk to Trumpers more? I'm like, you talk to Trumpers more. Have you talked to them? They call my show. There's nothing I can say that's going to change their mind. Nothing. Look, people have been invested in politics before, but this is unlike anything I've ever seen. There are people who love George Bush but it was never threats of violence in defense of George W. Bush. That was never a case. This is vastly different scenario we're living through.
Well, it's helpful to hear you say that, because I've wondered if it's tempting to look at the world today and say, well, it's worse than it's ever been in every single way. And in many ways, it does feel that way, even as I'm on climate change, but pandemics, racism, et cetera. I mean, it's been pretty bad on racism the whole time. But you've paid closer attention to politics over the years than I have. It's truly worse, right? And is it specifically with respect to the Trump days and that he's put upon people? Like, he's the hypnotist, right? On all the MAGA people. And is that what's so different, or are there other things that you see that are so different?
I don't think Trump made Republicans change. I think he let them be exactly who they always wanted to be, which was bigoted and cruel and celebration of idiocy. I mean, now there was a lot Trump did. The most dangerous thing has been the embrace of violence. But besides that, the celebration of idiocy, I noticed when Trump was saying things and some people weren't picking up on when he goes, I know more than the generals, or I know more than this person. And what he was telling his base is, you don't need to go to school for anything. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to work in a field. If your gut feeling tells you you're right on an issue, then you're right. You're smarter than any expert. And that really showed during COVID. We were dealing with really dangerous misinformation by people who will say, I'm right, because Trump told them. And I don't mean don't question scientists, don't question authority. Of course, question it. But to say I'm right because I just feel it, well, that's what Trump did, and that's what he allowed. But now we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and President Biden recently said he called MAGA semi-fascist, which is really Biden just still being Biden. We're he knows they're fascist, but he's doing semi, so he can be oh, I'm not saying all of MAGA, so I get it. But, fascism at its essence, and I wish people would explain it more for people to get. And Madeleine Albright wrote a great book called Fascism: A Warning. Fascism is not like socialism. It's not like communism. It's not an ideology like that. It's just a means to acquire and retain political power. You could be a socialist / fascist. You could be a liberal fascist. You can do that. People go why? That doesn't make sense. Because fascism, because it's an ism, people go, it's communism, socialism, fascism. No, they're not the same at all. You literally could be a liberal fascist. There's no way that's completely consistent. It's the idea of undermining our institutions. There's all these hallmark, trademark things: undermining institutions, turning people against each other, hyper-nationalism, rejecting science, and you can have all that kind of stuff. The core of it, as Madeleine Albright talks about, is the embrace of violence to acquire and retain political power. And that's what we're living through. January 6th was the most shocking example on our soil in my lifetime, because it wasn't Timothy McVeigh hanging out with a buddy blowing up a horrific thing in Oklahoma City. It was a movement that was brought forth by the leader of the Republican Party, who was president at the time, who to this day defends the terrorists who attacked our Capitol. And they are terrorists because DOJ has called that an act of domestic terrorism. And in the last few days, Donald Trump again he just touted Lindsey Graham saying, if they arrest Trump, there'll be riots in the streets. That's not hypothetical.
That's not democracy.
That's climbing the base. That's more fascism. So I think what we're seeing now is truly fascism on U.S. soil. And people hear fascism, they think a History Channel. Well, one day on the History Channel, this we're living through is going to be on. It's going to be a whole series about.
Will you be the host? That'll be nice. Yeah, at least narrate this.
I'm still alive. I don't know how this is all going to work out.
Right.
I have no idea what country I'll be in, how this plays out. I can narrate from anywhere. Coming to you live from, forget Canada's too close. I'm going to Italy or the Middle East. It's either
I was going to say,
or Italy.
This is the unexpected connection, is running those comedy shows in Jordan. Surely you have some allies there that you can hide in the basement and narrate the History Channel. Well, you also talk about Nazism a fair amount on Twitter and compare the GOP to Nazis. It sounds right to me, but
well, look, it's not. I don't call the GOP Nazis. I don't call Trump Hitler. I think they're different, and I think you have to be intellectually honest. I also think there are lessons, though, being intellectually honest, you can learn from the rise of Hitler that apply today. But it's not just Hitler. It's dangerous mass movements. I just read a great book from the 1950s called True Believer. It was an award winner from then. And it's about the history of mass movements. And when you read it, you realize a lot of it was in the post-Nazi war world that was written. They go through other mass movements. What MAGA is a dangerous mass movement. It has parallels to the movement of the Nazis, that Hitler came to power through democracy. He tried a coup in 23, didn't work out, goes to jail for like a year, writes Mein Kampf, comes out more popular than ever. It's like, he gets street cred. It's ridiculous. Comes out and realizes violence won't get him power. So they become engaged in politics. But then as they got more powerful, they started to use violence like we're seeing with Trump. They had their own Proud Boys, more dangerous, bigger, more organized. They had their own 3%ers, their own militias under the umbrella of Hitler and his top aides. And then they ran for office. The threat of violence was there. It's only when he became chancellor that they unleashed the blood purge. So if you follow what Hitler did and what the GOP does, they've embraced the threat of violence. They've used, the brown shirts of Hitler. You've got the Trump people making threats all the time. The national archivists, they're like librarians are getting death threats now. It's just an article in the Washington Post because they were pushing Trump to get documents. So to me, the parallels are more about Hitler does a coup, doesn't really get punished. Within 10 years is chancellor of Germany. Here comes World War II and the Holocaust.
Right.
I'm not saying we're on that path, but we are on a path where Trump attempted a coup and had January 6th, still not been punished at all.
Right.
And using democracy, he's been embraced by his party more than ever. If Donald Trump gets into power, I think nothing Hitler did short of a Holocaust. I don't see that. But blood purges, having his supporters violently get rid of people who oppose him, definitely. I think you'll definitely see that. I think we're on the path, honestly, for another Oklahoma City domestic terrorist bombing, unless something prevents that, because there are no Republican leaders denouncing Donald Trump's calls for, the supporting violence. There's none now at all. They've gone. So we're dealing with what I tweet daily is a white nationalist fascist movement on U.S. soil.
What do you think? So the other side of this is the encouraging, what we're staring down the barrel of the midterm elections. Is this something that, are you hopeful that the left can get it together and push this back? Because, you look at the elections that are going on and it's all Trump Republicans who are doing great, election deniers who are doing great, right? What do we, well, how do you not weep in despair every single day?
Well, because actually I would have a few months ago, it was very difficult to be optimistic, but the polls have shifted dramatically, and not just the polls, the response since Roe v. Wade was overturned, it changed everything. The energy of people who are not going to vote in the midterm is here. We saw it in the Kansas referendum. We saw it in a special election for Congress in upstate New York a week ago, where the Republican was polling ahead of the Democrat. The Democrat won the district more than Joe Biden did in 2020. So the energy is on our side, and that's what wins midterms. Midterm elections, we've had turnout of 40%. It's not like a presidential election year. 2018 was the biggest midterm turnout in decades, and it was slightly over 50%, folks. We don't need everyone to come out to win. We don't even need the coalition we got in 2020 to win. To be blunt, I wish we do. We get those numbers, we definitely win the House, and we add to the Senate. I think the energy's there. I think a combination of Democrats delivering on certain things, the economy is getting better, unemployment's lower, inflation's coming down, to helping seniors with Medicare, a cap on cost, and student loan cancellation for some is helping them. But people are seeing the extremism of the right. Just last week in Texas, a new law went into effect that bans abortion at conception, no rape and incest exceptions. And the penalty is life in prison, up to life in prison if you help a woman get an abortion. That's the law in Texas. It's going to be challenged in court, but that's now the law. The only exception is this bizarre thing about the health of the woman, but it's not even defined. So no doctor's going to risk going to jail for 20 years to do it, which means at conception in Texas, your uterus becomes property of the state of Texas. That's what we're dealing with. It's not, Andrea, it's not like Democrats have to talk about, Republicans are going to do this and that.
It's happening.
They're banning books. They're banning abortion. They're banning Black History Month. They're banning transgender teens from living their lives. They openly talk about banning marriage equality, openly opposed voting, the idea of having over 90% of Republicans to make a federal mandate to allow birth control access. They're not playing. That stuff is speculative, but they're telling you, but they are enacting laws to ban books that they don't agree with politically or religiously. They're imposing their religion as the law of the land. The Taliban should sue them for trademark infringement. It's like, that's us. Oklahoma, I'll see you in court. Texas, I'll see you, Greg Abbott, in court. That's what we're dealing with. It's not speculative. It's not like, you know what they're going to do, and we sound like politicians. It's just like, look what they're doing.
Right.
You want more of that? Do you want books that you can't? They're banning books not just in school, but in public libraries now. They've gone, and again, I made the analogy to the Nazis where they did the book burning, and it was a celebration of idiocy. Just listen to the Führer, which is just German for leader. Listen to the leader.
Right.
They began banning books at schools. Then they did it at libraries. Then they did it in bookstores. Then they came to people's homes and took the books out and they burned books. That's the next step if we continue on this trajectory. And one Virginia Republican already is trying to get a Barnes and Noble or a bookstore in his area to stop selling certain books. We are moving in that direction. The GOP never self-corrects to become more reasonable.
Yeah.
They always become more extreme until they lose enough elections where they self-correct for a little while.
And they have to.
They plot other ways.
So what keeps us from, so the Democrats do as well as we possibly could in the midterm, and then what keeps the Trump Republicans from storming the Capitol again and using even more violence? Like to me, it seems like, oh, if we just turn out to vote, then it's all solved, but it's not. It's an ongoing fight.
It is. I mean, I don't know how many will commit a mass act of terrorism like that, because there's so many went to prison and we're making an example of them. And some are languishing in prison cells without bail, and they deserve it. I've written about it. These aren't the people who just walked through or did minor things. People still in prison without bail are the worst of the worst. They were the leaders, Proud Boy leaders, the 3%ers leaders, the ones who beat up police officers horrifically. They really the bad people. They deserve to be in prison. That sends a good message. So if you want to give up your liberty and your life for Donald Trump or Trumpism, and some will, it's a sign of these mass movements. But I don't think you're going to have a civil war. I don't think it's going to be a vast amount of people. Right now, the best answer we have is voting in this midterm, keeping the barbarians at the gate, not letting them in. And from there, if we can add 2 more senators, just 2 more Democratic senators and hold the House, we can get rid of the filibuster and pass national minimum standards for elections, which is the key for, we believe in voting. So you have a national minimum standard for every state has the same amount of absentee ballots. It's not like in the red state, you get the only way to get an absentee ballot is this ridiculous thing. You got to know somebody and
you have to be in the hospital bleeding actively, whatever. Yeah.
No, if you have, look, it's ridiculous. We don't have national standards for federal candidates. People go to Congress to enact laws that affect all of us. They should be elected by the same standard nationwide. For governor races, for state races, okay, I get it. You can have different. But for federal, even on the concept of federalism, we should have a federal standard for federal office holders. They are setting laws for all of us. So the same amount of early voting days, 2 weeks for the whole nation, ending gerrymandering of federal election districts would change everything. Big money. You can only control federal elections by federal law. State law, you can't. You can try, but you really can't. It'll be probably struck down in the courts. Federal law, you can. So let's make our federal laws as good as possible to protect our democracy. You have democracy killers. They're democracy deniers, I call them, and democracy killers, running for Secretary of State in Arizona, the nominee. In Pennsylvania, the gubernatorial candidate, he gets to pick the Secretary of State, Doug Mastriano. He denies the election. He wants to go back and overturn the 2020 election. I mean, we should go back and overturn George Bush's election. I mean, just be insane. Like, you know what? Eisenhower, illegitimate. We're going back to 52. Where Adlai Stevenson was the rightful president, like some kind of Game of Thrones thing. Like he had a dragon. It's like, what? Nothing. It doesn't even make sense anymore. Just like crazy things. Look, I don't want to sugarcoat it. We're in a difficult situation, but the only answer I have is ballots. And that's what I want to stick with. And I think that's what we have to stick with, because anything else, this experiment fails. All
right. Ballots it is. So why do you like politics so much? I know a lot of people who care about politics, who get revved up ahead of elections and the future matters, but generally the tone is politics sucks. It's people arguing and it's messy. It sounds like you said you've been interested since the beginning. What drew you to this miserable world?
It's vastly different than today. When I was younger, it was just the idea of being able to have an impact on issues that you believe in. I mean, it was like that simple. Well, you can be a member of Congress and you can change things and you can change the laws. And this is great, huh? And you can do the right thing. And then as I get older, I was always liberal, but then you get more you understand what elected officials can do. And you're like, well, okay, you can also set tone on certain issues. You get out there and you have a pulpit and you could talk about things in the media. So it's not just legislating, it's also telling people in a way to affect cultural norms for the better. That's the hope. And then after 9/11, it became much more about pushing back against government sanctioned discrimination against the Muslim and Arab community.
Right.
And that was we were seeing that go on. And it's a new iteration. A new iteration is save our democracy. I mean, we've gotten to that. Like we've gotten to ambitiously want to change policies like, let's save democracy. But you have to have what I've learned from people, just saying, let's preserve the status quo doesn't get people up off the couch.
Status quo.
We're having a status quo rally out the union.
I love it.
Like all the people showing up, I want things exactly the way they are. Who's with me? Like, well, it's got to be. I've never been about the status quo. I've always been about let's change things for the better. So even with democracy, I'm not really about status quo. It's about saving democracy, but you've got to take more steps to really allow people to vote. The Voting Rights Act has been gutted by these monsters on the right. In 2013, the Supreme Court, and then again last year, where if you're Black in America, literally, you had more voting protection in August 1965 than you do today, because that's when the Voting Rights Act was signed. You literally, because the whole pre-clearance part, which was the heart and soul of it, is gone, thanks to the Republican Supreme Court in 2013. So I've written about this. I mean, it's stunning to tell people that, and they go, what? I go, that's where they're turning the clock back. That's making America great, where just white men own property, can own land. That's really the best argument the right has to this is we just want to make America the way it was in the beginning, which most people don't even learn in school. Only white men who own property, who were Christian, could vote. That's it. Jews were banned, or no, Muslims. There was a handful. There were some Muslims, but they weren't voting. And even Catholics couldn't vote. You had to be a certain kind of Christian. And then it evolved to where we are. And now we're going backwards in that regard. So to me, I mean, getting involved, just getting back to the question, I have this delusional belief that anyone can change the nation for the better. And as I've gotten older, I realize one person, it takes a lot. And there was a quote by Bobby Kennedy that I like. I'll paraphrase it but the idea that few of us can bend history on our own, but collectively we can write the story of this generation. And I've always thought that because even the littlest thing you do can help write the story of this generation. And I like that. And I share that with people that, people are like, what am I going to do about it? Well, climate change, you can't change everything, but you know what? If you get an electric vehicle, you're contributing. You're using mass transit, you're contributing. And that's the biggest, climate change. On democracy, it's getting involved, registering to vote, getting people out to vote, making sure people know where they can vote and how they can vote, because they've changed the laws in 19 states since the 2020 election to make it harder to vote in Republican states.
What do you say to people who say, well, there's no point, nothing will change, I'm going to get yelled at if I tweet something progressive on the internet or go out to try to register to vote, I'm going to get attacked and I fear for my...
You can register online, I think, so you don't have to
calm down. Yeah.
It's not Jim Crow South. You don't have to go in person.
All right, we're not there yet.
How many jelly bonds? Yeah, not yet. Look, people got to make their own choice for their own career. You can keep politics inside. There are plenty of celebrities. We have no idea their political stance. That's their choice. But you can also be active. I don't want people to lose. Don't become a martyr. You don't have to lose your job. Don't tweet crazy things about politics if you're going to lose your job for it. It's just not worth it. But you can still be active other ways, subtly, or get really active. I mean, I think if you feel like you're powerless, nothing changed it more than finding other people who are like-minded, who are trying to have an impact. And you're like, oh, wow, powerless alone in a group, in a movement, not powerless anymore.
Right.
And that's the good and bad of mass movements.
I was just going to say.
But the evil people, they're like, I can't bring down the government. Oh, I got all these people with me. Maybe I can bring down the government. That kind of thing. Like I can't make Trump king. Oh, I got a lot of other people who want to make Trump king and democracy. So get involved. You're going to find it inspiring, literally inspiring.
Do you think about running for office or getting involved in that way? Or are you on the journalism side?
I'm not a journalist.
You're not a journalist. But that's right. You write.
I'm an activist.
You write opinion pieces and all of that. Yes, right.
I'm an activist who masquerades as an opinion writer and a comedian. That's the commonality. I've always been an activist from the beginning. I've thought many, many times about running for office. It just hasn't been the right fit or the right time. There was a teeny moment earlier in the spring when they created a new congressional district in Lower Manhattan that I actually did talk to people about. It's not, I don't live in that district. I live 20 blocks from it. It wasn't like, he's just moving here. It's like, yeah, okay, one subway stop away.
Right.
But, I didn't have the wherewithal to raise the amount of money that it was going to need. And Daniel Goleman, who won the Democratic nomination, put $4 million of his own dollars into it. So that shows you what it would have taken to be, I'm slightly known in progressive circles, but it would have taken a lot of money to get really known. So I've thought about it. I think, maybe the bottom line is I want to be effective in whatever I think I can be most effective at. Like if I could host Rachel Maddow's show full time, probably more effective at affecting opinion than a member of Congress. Just can't vote on laws. It's really about effectiveness.
Why do you think, let me back up. So I want to talk about some of the connections between your paths. So it sounds like even just talking about politics today, and I've noticed this on your show as well, you're able to talk with a lot of ease about the law side of thing and the courts and that sort of thing. Do you see your time as a lawyer as 1000% obviously helpful to your life now? Or do you think of it as like a detour where you said, oh, hang on, that's not getting me where I want to go?
No, education is good. So whatever education, don't celebrate any idiocy, celebrate knowledge. So if you can afford it, go to school forever. School was great. I love school. I love learning. I mean, like if there are different things, I'm like, well, what can I be next? A professor? Like, but I don't really I'd rather be the student and learn more because I love reading. I'm always reading books. My law background helps my writing. It gives me credibility. I'll tell you, if anyone, I don't know what it's like to have an MBA or you have a PhD. My sister has a PhD. I don't know how that helps you or not. But oddly enough, having a law degree gives you credibility in every situation. You cannot believe. I believe it as a lawyer, as a writer, as a radio host. There's this weird thing to go, well, he's a lawyer. I'm like, what's not really relevant to this? But I'm like, okay. So for my radio show, it helped a great deal because there were a lot of people competing for this full-time slot on SiriusXM. I came from a different channel doing 1 hour a day. And what it came down to is like, well, it's a political channel. Trump was in office for a year. Like there's going to be a lot of legal stuff. And Dean is a former lawyer and the other people weren't. And that's what got me a full-time hosting job on radio. It's kind of weird. And it makes it like, if you don't know anything about law, I practiced law for about 6 years. If you know nothing about law, you could read a little bit and think you understand it, but you're not going to understand how it connects. You're not going to understand how you're reading a statute that actually is no longer valid, or how a court has struck it down, or how courts have interpreted. And you're probably not going to speak with confidence because you don't fully get it. If you're a sane human being, you're going to be like, it's like I'm reading a medical book. So I read about one disease, like I know about 5 others. I have no idea. So that's what really helps me, seeing how the things come together, using the law. I mean, the last year I filed a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission against Fox News for violating the COVID Consumer Fraud Act because they were lying about COVID, about the disease and about cures for it, or things that they were making up garbage. It was almost like snake oil garbage. They were doing that. I filed that, and a lot of people joined me. We didn't change them, but at least I just filed a Freedom of Information Act request to the Department of Justice, trying to get all the documents that Donald Trump declassified, wink, wink, at Mar-a-Lago, because if you declassify them, just so people get, you're not declassifying for you, you're declassifying for everybody. Like I can find out all of our spies in Eastern Europe. Isn't this great? I can build a Stinger aircraft machine, anti-aircraft weapon in my apartment. I can maybe do room temperature fusion. I can't wait to get these documents. The reality is he did not declassify them. Although, to be honest, he could declassify them for a minute, and then Biden comes in and instantly goes like, what? We're classifying all of them. But I was just trying to make the point using the law. I thought about it. I'm like, what do you do here? So Freedom of Information Act request lets me get unclassified documents. So I'm going to say, and I put in my request, I want the documents Donald Trump declassified at Mar-a-Lago. And I request as a member of the media, but anyone could request it. It's online. It'll take you 3 minutes. And I posted about it and people liked it a lot. So the law actually helps you understand your rights and how to even troll people on some odd level in an effective way. You know, I've sued people for defamation, and I had lawyers do it in this time of Trump, and I knew my rights since I knew it was defamation, what the people had done. So I'm like, and I had lawyers, and we sued, and I'm not getting the money. I sued neo-Nazis, but the point was I was not going to let neo-Nazis try to shut me up or intimidate me.
I feel tempted to say, oh, you have this, legal superpower, but it's really more of a tool that we could all have if we had that kind of education. I mean, would you advocate legal education for everyone? I've never touched. Should there at least be a legal class in high school or something? Not that would get you there.
I know.
Yeah, but I don't know anything.
Your entire
I had to Google
life,
what an affidavit is. I really don't know anything.
In America, your life is controlled by law.
Yeah.
And that was why I wanted to go to law school. I'm like, our whole lives are controlled by law. Wouldn't it be a good idea to understand what controls our lives? But you could also make the argument for health and medicine too. Our lives are controlled by our health. But the law is imposed upon us. So I've always I want to know as much as possible about that. If people have 3 years or 4 years at night to go to law school and you have any interest in it, it's going to help your career. Sure. I think it's great. I think it was depends the law school you're going to. I went to Fordham in New York, which is a more practical minded law school. Like it teaches you the concepts of law that you need, but also had teachers who are in New York, practicing attorneys who come in and share real life. If you go to from what I understand, like Harvard and Yale, great law schools, it's much more theoretical. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have an understanding about the theory of law. I probably knew more about the real application of law because a lot of my professors were full-time. They were lawyers who were adjuncts. They were Fordham alumni, and they come in on the weekend or during the week and teach you. So I think going to law school gives you an understanding. Practicing law really made me understand things I was taught in law school, which I have no idea. I leave and I memorized, and I took the bar and I passed New York and Jersey, and it's because I'm great at memorizing, but then you don't understand it. Like you realize later in life, because then you practice law and you're like, oh, that's what that kind of jurisdiction means. And you're like, that's what a tort. Now I see why this is what's called a tort. Like, why is this? Why isn't this kind of stuff? So go to law school, then practice law for 4 or 5 years.
Okay, great. Do that. The Dean Obeidallah 3-step program to understanding what controls you. I'm sure the answer is no, given everything you've just said, but is there like a book that's at least a starting point for someone like me who doesn't know anything but is vaguely motivated based on this conversation?
Funny you ask. I have Dean Obeidallah's Learn the Law in 3 easy steps. It's just available right now. Online
class from Phoenix University or University of Phoenix, whatever.
Dean University. I bought Trump University.
Right.
Dean University.
Comes with a free Dean Obeidallah cardboard cutout that we can stand next to.
That's it. Like my lawyer can beat up your lawyer. That's going to bumper stickers. Look, there are probably tons of like law for dummies type of stuff. Read about an area that interests you and read a lot of stuff. You're not learning it to practice law. You're learning it to understand an area of law. It's like there's a lot of stuff like, what I really recommend for people, and it's easy reading and it's free. The Congressional Research Service, CRS. Okay. It's online. You can Google any topic like election law and a thing and put CRS or Congressional Research Service. And they'll have like a 3 or 4 page thing there that's available that is easy to read with a lot of sites. I look at that all the time for legal, like the Presidential Records Act. I Google Presidential Records Act and Congressional Research Service, and you get the history of the law. Like, why was the law passed? Why behind the laws are more important than the words? Like, why do we have a Presidential Records Act? Then when you understand it happened after Watergate in 1978, because we don't want criminals like Richard Nixon to do what he did. Like, this is actually kind of important. It's not a game. The National Archives, we have to keep records. And then when you realize the law defines these documents as our documents, not the president's, then you get angry. You go, he stole our documents.
That's my document. Yeah.
Right. That's son of a bitch. So when you understand the law and the why behind it, I think it's so much more important than reading the statute and trying to understand every clause. Because it really, you're like, what the hell? Even I read something, I'm like, you couldn't write it any more plain. You had to do that. There's no need.
It makes medical journals easy reading for me compared to this stuff. I mean, I can't understand any of it, but I at least feel less dumb somehow.
Well, Congressional Research Service, online, Google it. They're everywhere. It's from the government. It's a nonpartisan agency of the government. Members of Congress, when they need information, they get it from them. And they have lawyers write it up, but they post online. Like everything is there now. It's just great.
All right. Wow. Normally we put links to people's Twitter. We'll do that. And we'll also put Congressional Research Service underneath. That's fabulous. I mean, even things like you said, it's theoretical theory of law. I don't even really know what that means. So I got to work on that.
Well, I mean, we're talking about bigger questions about like personal injury and what's negligence and why can you win a lawsuit? And what are the elements of negligence? That's more theoretical. Like here are the elements of defamation. Here's the elements of manslaughter in a criminal case. That's the theory of it. That's like, here's a law, but you want to know the practicality. Like the words manslaughter and the elements mean nothing unless I tell you how they've been applied by the courts and our legal system. Then the light bulb goes off. You're like, oh.
Like this happened to this person and that was the punishment.
Right. That's why I literally was reading James Comey's statement on July 6th, 2016, explaining why they didn't prosecute Hillary Clinton. And he went to forget what the right wing says about what they did and what they didn't. This is what the FBI and the Department of Justice found. He was articulating it. And there's a really great passage in it why he says we're not going to prosecute Hillary Clinton. And he said, in every case we've prosecuted before, here are 4 different things we have found. And we didn't find those in this case. What I find really interesting is you find those in the Trump case. Mm-hmm. So you have the distinction. Now, this is a legal distinction. It's smart. It's subtle. Fox News is never going to want to make it, but lawyers reading it are going like, oh. And I did a Twitter thread before I came on, just quoting from it. So people see, like, here's what James Comey said. In every case we prosecuted, we found this, or that. There are 4 different things. And you can find any of the 4. In Trump, there are 2 of the 4, and arguably a third of the 4 has happened. There's no doubt. And James Comey laid out in detail there, we found that while there were classified information, only a few of the emails bore those markings. Donald Trump, every single document, every single page said classified, every single one. So that's gone too. You're taking that out right away. Now, she couldn't declassify. He argued he can declassify, but he didn't, because if he did, all those agencies would have been told he declassified because they need to know it because they're exposing their assets.
Right.
You're telling the guy that spy
by the way,
in Russia. You better tell him to get the hell out of Moscow.
Yeah,
it's now open to anyone can get it. So
yeah, Dean's got it, for God's sake. Yeah,
I'm waiting. If I get it, I'm gonna have the knock list from Mission Impossible.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to it. So that's why I think the law, it teaches you a way to address things. You go to the source all the time. So instead of reading Wall Street Journal op-ed, which Republicans are tweeting about today from yesterday going, well, Hillary, it was wrong they didn't prosecute, but you can't prosecute Trump. Well, if you read it, they selectively say what's important. So I'm like, let me go to the source. Let me see what James Comey said, not what the media said. What did the DOJ say? Because they actually said in their standard of charging Hillary, one thing they take into account, they really do, is what has DOJ done with the same circumstance in the past? They need to be consistent. So I hate whataboutisms in the world of politics, but DOJ looks at it from a legal point about whataboutisms. Like if Hillary did the exact same thing as Trump, if they did the exact same thing and you didn't charge Hillary,
right? If
you charge Trump, it's going to undermine the rule of law. It really will. The only way to charge Trump is to say, here's a standard we articulated in 2016, and here it clearly applies to Trump. So people can be intellectually dishonest on the right. The biggest thing I learned, go back to the source. Look at the sources. I tell my liberal friends, they forward me stuff that's arguably misinformation. I'm like, you have to look at the source.
Yeah.
You can't send it to me because you agree with it. Look, it's coming from a blog I never heard of a person.
Right.
And I'm like, no, there are no footnotes. I have no idea. And I'm not a jerk about it. I go, you got to look at the source. Send it to me from mainstream ABC, NBC, CNN. I'll believe it then. And I'll even click on their links to say, look, where are they going? Look at the source. That's so important for critical thinking skills. And that's something in America, I think everyone, forget law. I mean, if everyone learned critical thinking skills, misinformation is harder to peddle and be accepted.
Yes. I was like, I agree. It would be amazing if I was like, actually, I have a different take, but I agree with you on that. All right. So law seems incredibly useful in your life and potentially in all of ours. So we're all going to spend the next 7 years doing that. How about SNL? Does that fit into and inform your work today?
It does, in that I learned a lot about production, and I have a radio show, not a TV show. I learned more about comedy. It was like going to grad school for comedy, working there, watching the process every week, hearing the writers, because I would sit on the edge of the writer's room on writing, doing research for them. But then as a result, you start talking to them about the pieces they're working on what they're writing, and watching just production of the show each week. So I learned a lot about comedy, which helps me now in terms of comedy and life. But also, it's an odd thing, but when I worked as a lawyer and when I worked at SNL, the commonality there was that if you worked as a lawyer or you worked at Saturday Night Live, it was your life. That was your life. There was no outside life. That was it. You were a lawyer. You worked nonstop as a lawyer. At SNL, That was your entire existence. So it's odd for me to see people in the corporate world, like even at SiriusXM, where it's just a job. Like it's not their passion, it's not their calling. I'm like, why do you do this then? Like, why are you here? Do something that you care so much about, that it is your life and you're defined by it because you enjoy it. Not every day, I get it, but like it's weird to see people who work in fields where it really is like a clock in and clock out. And at SNL, I mean, we worked all hours of the day, all hours of night. When I was a lawyer, it was a similar thing. But SNL, you literally worked nights because it was Saturday Night Live, the night part.
Not Saturday 9 to 5 live. Yeah.
It wasn't Saturday Day Live. So the thing I learned from there, which applies today, but I had the work ethic before, is that I don't subject the two people who work on my show to my thing, but I work 7 days a week. I don't work as many hours on the weekend, but it's part of who I am. I can't help it.
So I'm so glad you said that, and we'll close on this because I have a constant conflict in my own life about this, because I tend to be most animated and enjoy myself when I'm doing something that defines me and that I like can't stop thinking about and lose yourself and all that stuff. But everything you read on the internet, heavy air quotes, is like balance and quiet quitting and boundaries between work and life. And I get that we need to sleep and it's nice to, look at the sky every now and again. But I feel the same way as you, where it's like, if I'm not all in, I almost don't know why I'm doing it.
I think,
are we crazy? Are we
no, I think that,
unhealthy?
I think it's because if you're doing something that you personally invested in, whatever it is, whatever you think you should be doing, the voice in your head is telling you this is the thing you should be doing. It's still work. It's not like I don't know this is work. It's work. But I still feel like with my radio show, I'm having a little bit of impact on people. I'm talking to people about issues that I'm passionate about. I pick the topics on my show. I think if you're working things you care about, the balance is built in because, you're going to take time off when you don't need to talk about things. Like for me, my time off is like, I'm reading this great biography on Teddy Roosevelt. Like that's my
really kicking back.
I'm loving this. I just read before that Gordon Liddy from Watergate, his autobiography. And I love it. Was a great book. And I learned more about Watergate. And he also, the odd thing about Fordham Law is so many Watergate people were involved, went to Fordham Law or Fordham undergrad. It's just so bizarre. Gordon Liddy, John Mitchell, the attorney general who went to jail. Another big person in there went to Fordham, and then Trump went to Fordham undergrad for 2 years before he went to UPenn. And Pat Cipollone, who's Trump's White House counsel, went to Fordham undergrad, and then he went to like Yale Law School or University of Chicago Law School. But to me, the balance, I don't read nonfiction. I mean, I don't read fiction.
Yeah.
Like, people want a vacation. My vacation is Teddy Roosevelt in the Dakotas fighting the bison. That I'm reading about this guy. I'm like, what an amazing life this is. I don't want to do it. I have no desire to go to North Dakota. But my vacation is reading nonfiction and learning about things, whatever. I read so many books at the same time, but I make time reading Andy Borowitz's new book. I love Andy. He's going to come on my show in a week, and I love Andy. And it's a serious book. It's not like a comedic book like that he writes for the New Yorker. But to me, the vacation is reading these books. They're the greatest escape. I really love reading.
It reminds me I mean this in a flattering way. It reminds me of my father in the sense that he's a filmmaker, but when he had time off, which he never did, but like at night before he fell asleep, he would read, this was the 90s, so it was paper magazines about like the latest film, like camera equipment. And he would just read to keep up with like what other things were coming out. And I was like, that's cool. What advice, you started off with this, we all have a voice in our head that's telling us what it is that we want to do. What advice do you have to someone who's listening who says, I can't hear that voice. I don't know. I kind of am all over the place.
I honestly believe that if you just sit down and ask yourself, what do you want to do? You might have to write a list. I mean, there are people who organically are like, I don't know what I want to do. I think deep down, they have a sense of what they want to do. They might say, well, I can't make a living that way, whatever it is. Like you're going to, squeeze your old olive oil and sell it on the street corner. Like that's what I want to do. It doesn't have to be radio host or comedian or professor. It could be anything. I want to be a ski instructor, but I don't know how to ski. Well, it's going to make it challenging. I think the biggest thing is have an open mind about things, learn, ask yourself questions about, am I enjoying this? Am I not? What do I like about it? And there's a subset in your work that you like then try to do more of that. Try to talk to your boss, or if you're your own boss, have other people do stuff that you don't like in it. But I really think it's about being honest with yourself more than anything. If you're not hearing your own voice, it's because you're not being honest. Somebody have to sit and really ask yourself, what do I enjoy? Even if it's ridiculous. And then how can I monetize that? There's certain things you might not want to monetize, but there could be certain things like that. Don't tell anyone.
So the takeaway here.
Right. No, but whatever you enjoy, whatever it is, I love being outdoors. Okay. Well, then how could you make working outdoor in a field something that might be a good fit for you? Right. I'm not saying being a lumberjack. There could be something else. I like whatever it is. I think you've got to find sometimes it's lucky. People are like, I want to do this. I've always known I wanted to do this. They're lucky. If they listen to the voice and follow it, it works out. Others are not sure, but they know what they like, and try to find those things and then see what career at least touches on that the most. And then at least you're doing more of what you like to do.
Right. Well, and it sounds like your path has been a case in point in the sense that activism, politics, and then there's been a lot of steps to find the domain where you are now, which is not where you set out to be, right? You didn't say at 12, I'm going to be a radio host. Yeah.
No, I did always want to have the Dean Obeidallah show, but I thought it was going to
be
I thought it was going to be a TV show. So I'm just in the wrong medium. I wasn't focusing enough on the medium, apparently.
Right.
And who would have thought podcasts are going to come up? So, I'm doing a radio show. It's a real radio show, but at some point I imagine doing a podcast where it might not be as time intensive. If I can get better known, I just did a few days a week, then it gives me more time to do, not to hang out and do nothing, but to do more writing, to do more in person. The biggest thing I regret from this show is not being able to do the in-person activism. I would go to events and stuff. I have to be doing my show. So my next iteration I can see down the road is something that's not as demanding in time, where I can do this still, but go out and do activism. And maybe then that's where running for office comes from.
All right. Well, I will donate to your campaign. I don't have 4 million, but I'll donate something.
1 million?
Well, okay, fine. Yeah, I'll send you a check now just to get you going.
So, all right, thank you.
Well, Dean, thank you so much for doing the show. Where can folks find you and follow you? We'll post all the links, of course, as well, in addition to the
if you're on Twitter, at Dean Obeidallah, which is Dean Obeidallah, or Facebook.com/Dean of Radio, or my website is deanofradio.com, or drop me an email if you have a question. Dean, just DEAN, at deanofradio.com. That's it. That's me.
Excellent. And I think a new rule is a sign of success is you've got your name in 2 places in 1 email address. So that's I aspire to that.
Dean at deanofradio.com. I didn't think of that. Yeah, I like it.
Nice. .Dean. Okay. Great.
Not the Dean. It's just Dean, by the way.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Dean. And sure. Everyone go listen to his show and read his writing and follow him on all the things and vote, for heaven's sake.
Thank God. Yes. Nice chatting with you, Andrew. Have a great day.
Likewise. You too.
Bye-bye.
And that's our show. Thank you so much for joining us for season 2 of Majoring in Everything. We're very excited to bring you all the amazing guests we've got for you this season. Don't forget to keep majoring in everything yourself. And Eric, did I do it? Is this a good second outro? See you next time.